I had lived on my land for nearly a decade, and in all those years, no one had ever questioned my right to be there. It was mine, purchased fair and square, sitting on over 5 acres of secluded property. The kind of place where you could watch the sunset over the treetops without another soul in sight. Then, one morning, that peace was shattered. I was in my garage, tuning up my old truck, when I heard the rumble of an engine pulling up my driveway. Not just any engine, SUV tires crunching against gravel. My land was private, with no trespassing signs posted at every entry point. Nobody came up this way unless they had a damn good reason. I wiped my hands on a rag and stepped outside. That's when I saw them. 2 men stood just beyond my property line, both wearing police-style tactical vests. The bold white letters HOA enforcement were stitched across their chests. Their black SUV was parked at an angle, blocking part of the driveway, its tinted windows hiding whoever else was inside. I immediately knew something was off. Real cops don't park like that. Real cops announce themselves, these guys. They were playing a role. The bald one, thick-necked and barrel-chested, stepped forward. He was built like a retired linebacker, the kind of guy who used his size to get what he wanted. His mirrored sunglasses reflected the sunlight, and his smirk told me he enjoyed this way too much. The wiry guy next to him was the opposite, lean, sharp-featured, clipboard in hand, eyes scanning my property like he was already appraising it. My stomach tightened. This wasn't a friendly visit. The bald one cleared his throat. "Sir, your property is in violation of HOA standards." I crossed my arms. "What?" he smirked. "You heard me. As of last week, your neighborhood has been incorporated into the Willow Crest Homeowners Association. All properties must now comply with HOA regulations." I raised an eyebrow. "That's funny. I don't live in an HOA." The wiry one flipped a page on his clipboard. "You do now. Failure to comply will result in immediate legal action, including potential seizure of property." I almost laughed. "You're joking." But the bald one just smiled wider. "We don't joke about violations, sir. Violations. Seizure." This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a shakedown. I stepped closer to the gate, my voice steady. "You think you can just show up here and tell me I don't own my own land?" The bald one tilted his head, amused. "Ownership is complicated," he said smoothly. "What matters is that this land is now subject to Willow Crest HOA oversight." I clenched my jaw. "Get off my property." He didn't move. Instead, the wiry one flipped another page, tapping his clipboard. "Sir, if you refuse to comply, we have the authority to fine you, issue warnings, and if necessary, take further action." I wasn't an idiot. I knew exactly what was happening. They weren't real law enforcement. They were frauds. Con men in fake uniforms, running a scam, hoping to catch someone gullible enough to fall for it. I took another step forward, lowering my voice. "I'm going to say this one more time. Get off my land." For the first time, the bald one's smirk faltered. He exhaled sharply, turned his head slightly toward the wiry guy, then gave a small nod. The wiry guy slid a folded paper through the bars of my gate. "This is your official notice," he said. "You have 48 hours to comply." Then, just as quickly as they arrived, they left. I waited until their SUV disappeared down the road before grabbing the paper and unfolding it. I scanned it quickly, and I saw red. The paper was official-looking, legalese, county stamps, all the right wording. But I knew enough about property law to recognize the signs of a forged document. The HOA did not exist. There was no incorporation, no county approvals. It was a complete fabrication. They were trying to steal my land. I took a deep breath, trying to calm the fury rising in my chest. Then my phone buzzed, a blocked number. I hesitated, then answered. A distorted voice spoke. "See you soon, Mr. Walker." The line went dead. I stood there for a moment, the weight of the threat sinking in. This wasn't just some paperwork scam. This was organized, planned, deliberate, and they weren't done. I clenched the paper in my fist, my jaw tightening. If they wanted a fight, they just picked the wrong damn person. But the story didn't end there. The next morning they came back, and this time, they didn't come alone. I barely got a few hours of sleep that night. My mind wouldn't shut off, replaying the encounter over and over. Every instinct screamed that these guys weren't bluffing. They were coming back. I just didn't expect them to show up this fast. The next morning, just as I stepped out onto my front porch with a cup of coffee, I heard it. Engines, multiple. A convoy of vehicles rolled up my driveway, kicking up a cloud of dust. The same black SUV from yesterday was leading the pack, followed by two more trucks, one carrying what looked like construction equipment, and then I saw it, a bulldozer. My stomach dropped. I set my coffee down, straightened my back, and stepped off the porch. The bald one, who I now knew was named Harris, climbed out of the SUV, still wearing that same smug grin. Clipboard guy, Bishop, was right behind him, this time accompanied by 4 more men, not contractors, hired muscle. Thick-necked, tattooed, arms crossed over bulletproof vests, these weren't construction workers. These were enforcers. Harris smoothed out his vest and strolled toward me. "Morning, Mr. Walker. Looks like you didn't take our notice seriously." I exhaled slowly, keeping my voice calm. "Get off my land." Bishop flipped through his clipboard, acting as if he hadn't heard me. "You were given 48 hours to comply with HOA regulations. Since you failed to make the necessary changes, we're proceeding with property correction." I stared at him. "Property correction?" Harris chuckled. "Demolition, son," he gestured toward the bulldozer. "Starting with that ugly old fence of yours." My fingers curled into fists. "You're trespassing." Harris sighed dramatically. "No, we're enforcing community standards." Then he snapped his fingers. The bulldozer roared to life. The driver revved the engine, treads grinding against the gravel as it lurched forward, heading straight for my fence. That was it. Enough. I whipped out my phone. "This is private property. You step 1 inch further and I'll call the cops." Harris grinned wider. "Go ahead." I hesitated. He wanted me to call them. Why, then it hit me. They were fake cops. They were counting on the real police not taking me seriously. I took a slow breath and put the phone back in my pocket. "Fine. We do this my way." I stepped forward right up to Harris. "You think this is a game?" I said, my voice low. Harris tilted his head. "Oh, it's not a game, Walker. It's business." I could feel the tension thickening in the air. Bishop shifted nervously, sensing that things were about to turn. I turned to the workers. "You all need to understand something. If you break so much as a single plank on my property, that makes you criminals. And when this is over, I'll make sure every single one of you faces charges." One of the younger guys hesitated, glancing at the others. Harris caught it and laughed. "Don't listen to him. He's just trying to scare you." Then he turned back to me, stepping closer. "Too close. You don't have the power to stop this." That's when I smiled. "That's where you're wrong." Before Harris could react, I lifted my arm and pointed at the tree line. Harris's smirk vanished. A red laser dot appeared right in the center of his chest. He froze. So did Bishop. So did the workers. Every single one of them stopped breathing. I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. Then another red dot appeared, this time on Bishop's forehead. My sniper was already locked in. Harris slowly turned his head, his mirrored sunglasses reflecting the blinking red dot on his vest. I could practically see the gears turning in his brain. He knew exactly what this meant. I folded my arms. "Tell your men to turn off the bulldozer. Now." Harris didn't speak. I nodded toward the tree line. "You really want to gamble, Harris? You want to test how fast my sniper's trigger finger is?" Bishop swallowed hard. His voice shook. "Harris, maybe we should." "Shut up," Harris hissed. But I could see it now, the doubt. He had shown up here thinking he had all the power, that I was just some dumb homeowner who would back down the second he flexed. But now, the fear was setting in. He had no idea who was watching, no idea if that sniper would pull the trigger. Then I took a step closer, lowering my voice. "You have 10 seconds." Harris's nostrils flared. He clenched his jaw, his fingers twitched. Then, without turning, he barked out a single order: "Kill the engine." The bulldozer rumbled down into silence. I could see the workers exhaling in relief, some of them visibly shaking. But I wasn't done. I turned to Bishop. "Drop the clipboard." He did. I nodded at the workers. "Pick up your tools and leave. You don't work for these guys anymore." One by one, they started walking away. Harris stood there, breathing hard, his face turning red. I smirked. "Looks like you just lost your workforce." Bishop didn't move. His eyes flicked between Harris and me, his hands still raised. Then I said the words that I knew would cut the deepest. "Leave now, Harris, and don't come back." His fists clenched. I could see his rage boiling, but he knew. He lost this round. Finally, he exhaled sharply and turned toward his SUV. "This isn't over," he growled. I smiled. "I'm counting on that." Then they climbed back into their SUV, and just like that, they were gone. The second their tail lights disappeared, I pulled out my phone. A single text, me, still in position. A response came immediately: "Jake, always." I let out a breath and grinned. I wasn't alone in this, and next time, Harris wouldn't be walking away so easily. I barely had time to enjoy my victory before Harris made his next move. The following morning, I stepped outside to a sickening sight. My mailbox had been smashed, completely obliterated. The wooden post was split in half, like someone had taken a sledgehammer to it. But that wasn't the worst part. A bright red eviction notice was stapled to my front door. I ripped it down, my hands shaking as I read it. By order of the Pine Ridge HOA, this property has been seized for failure to comply with community regulations. All structures are subject to removal. Vacate immediately or face legal action. At the bottom, Harris's fake signature was stamped beside some fraudulent legal jargon. I clenched my jaw. Oh, so that's how he wanted to play it. I heard tires crunching on gravel. Looking up, I saw a white van pull into my driveway, the kind contractors used. The side was marked with the words, "Certified HOA Enforcement, Bull." A few men in cheap uniforms hopped out carrying tools, chainsaws, crowbars, and even a wrecking bar. I stepped forward. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" One of them, a wiry guy with a crooked nose, held up a clipboard. "We're here to remove unauthorized structures." I laughed. "This is private property." He didn't even flinch. "Not according to our records. This land now belongs to the HOA. I glanced at his clipboard. Same fake paperwork as before. Harris was doubling down. I took a slow breath, forcing myself to stay calm. "Fine, you want to act like a government official. Let's see how well you handle some real government scrutiny." I pulled out my phone. "All right. If that's the case, let's get law enforcement involved." Crooked Nose hesitated. "Excuse me," I hit dial. "Yeah, Sheriff, I need you out here ASAP. I've got trespassers attempting illegal property seizure." The second I said "Sheriff," I saw a flicker of panic cross his face. The other guys shifted uncomfortably. "Sir," Crooked Nose said, trying to keep his composure, "there's no need to involve law enforcement. We're just following orders." "From who?" "The HOA that doesn't legally exist." I snapped. Silence. They knew they were caught. The van driver turned and muttered, "Screw this. I ain't getting arrested for some HOA scam." He hopped back into the van. Crooked Nose hesitated. Then he turned and followed. Just like that, his crew bailed. The van peeled out of my driveway, tires spitting gravel. I exhaled watching them go, but I wasn't stupid. This wasn't over. Harris had more moves to play, and I needed to make my next one before he did. After the failed eviction stunt, I called up my lawyer, Dave. Dave was an old-school guy, gray-haired, sharp as hell, and meaner than a junkyard dog when it came to real estate law. I sent him every fraudulent document Harris had issued. Within an hour, Dave called back. "Walker, this is a goddamn mess. Tell me something I don't know." He let out a low whistle. "These guys are either the dumbest criminals I've ever seen, or they've been pulling this scam for years. Think you can shut them down?" Dave chuckled. "Oh, I can do better than that. Give me one day." While Dave worked his legal magic, I got busy securing my property. I reinforced my gates. I repositioned my security cameras, and most importantly, I called Jake. "Me, need another favor." "Jake, what's the target?" "Me, surveillance. I need eyes on Harris and his crew." Jake responded in less than 5 seconds. "Jake, already watching. You're gonna love this." A few minutes later, a video came through. I hit play. The footage showed Harris standing outside a warehouse, talking to a man I didn't recognize. But I recognized the trucks in the background. They belonged to a shady contractor company that had been shut down last year for fraud. So that's how Harris was funding this. They weren't just trying to steal my property. They were running a full-blown racket. I smirked. Oh, this was better than I thought. I forwarded the video to Dave. "Dave, beautiful. I'm gonna bury these idiots in so much legal trouble they won't see daylight for a decade." Now all I had to do was wait. The next night I got the call. It was Jake. "They're coming back." I grabbed my rifle. "How many?" "4 cars. Looks like they brought some friends." I loaded the magazine. "I'll be ready." The second I stepped onto my porch, I saw them. A convoy of SUVs rolled up my driveway, headlights cutting through the darkness. Harris stepped out first, flanked by 6 more guys in tactical vests, all carrying flashlights and crowbars. This wasn't just intimidation anymore. They were here to take my house by force. But they made one critical mistake. They forgot that I was watching them first, and that's when I gave Jake the signal. The red dot appeared on Harris's forehead. His smirk vanished instantly. He froze, his hands instinctively going up. One by one, the dots appeared on the rest of his crew. Now, instead of looking like a group of enforcers, they looked like a bunch of scared rats trapped in a corner. I cocked my rifle. "You're done, Harris." He gritted his teeth, his confidence crumbling. Then a sound pierced the night air, sirens. Red and blue flashed through the trees as multiple police cruisers flew up my driveway. Harris whipped around, eyes wide. I grinned. "I told you this wasn't over." The cops poured out, guns drawn. The lead officer shouted, "Drop your weapons." Hands in the air. Harris didn't move. For the first time, I saw true fear in his eyes. Bishop, the clipboard guy, immediately raised his hands. "Don't shoot, don't shoot." The others hesitated, then dropped their crowbars. "But Harris." He shook his head, backing up. No, you can't do this to me." I stepped forward, lowering my rifle. "You did this to yourself." The lead cop moved in, handcuffs at the ready. Harris bolted. He barely made it 10 steps before he was tackled to the ground. He screamed, kicking and thrashing, but it was over. They hauled him up and shoved him into the back of a cruiser. As they slammed the door shut, he locked eyes with me. Pure hatred. I smiled. "You picked the wrong guy, Harris." He screamed something I couldn't hear, but I didn't care. Because he was going away for a long time, and my land was mine again. Harris was hauled off in cuffs, but I knew this wasn't over. Guys like him don't just roll over and accept defeat. They get desperate, and desperate men make dangerous choices. I had a gut feeling that the real storm was still coming, and I was right. The next day, the morning after Harris's arrest, I woke up to something unsettling. A black SUV was parked just outside my property line, engine running, tinted windows hiding whoever was inside. I stepped onto my porch, coffee in hand, watching. They didn't move. They just sat there, watching me. I knew exactly what this was. Harris might have been arrested, but he wasn't working alone, and whoever was left, they were still out there. I turned and called Jake. "Me, I've got company." "Jake, how many?" "Me. One car, just sitting there." "Jake, want me to say hello?" I smirked. "Nah, let's see how long they last." For the next 2 hours, the SUV didn't move. I went about my morning routine, cleaned my rifles, checked my security cameras, and made sure my land was still mine. By noon, the SUV finally pulled away. No confrontation, no threats, just a silent message. They wanted me to know they weren't done yet. Fine. Neither was I. After Harris's arrest, Sheriff Duncan had promised to dig deeper into who he was working with, and that afternoon I got the call. "Sheriff Duncan, you're gonna want to hear this." "Me. Tell me you got something good." Duncan exhaled sharply. "Oh, we got plenty." He went on to explain that Harris wasn't just a small-time con man. He was part of a larger network, an organized scam targeting landowners. They'd fake HOA claims, forge legal documents, and strong-arm homeowners into selling their land for pennies on the dollar. Once they had the land, they'd flip it, pocketing the cash before skipping town. And here's the kicker. They had done this before in 3 different states, and Harris, he was just the muscle. The real mastermind was still out there. A guy named Leon Mercer. The name made my blood run cold, because I had heard of him before. Mercer was a crooked real estate developer, one who had been accused of running housing scams across the country. He had deep pockets, powerful connections, and no morals. And now he had a personal reason to come after me. That night I was ready. Jake was watching my perimeter. I had my rifle loaded and my security feeds up on my laptop. And then it happened. 1:13 a.m., the motion detectors pinged. A figure moved through the trees just beyond my fence line. Too careful, too slow. This wasn't some random trespasser. This was someone who knew how to move without being seen. I silently grabbed my rifle. The feed showed a man in dark clothes creeping toward my shed. And then my phone buzzed. "Jake, got eyes. Want me to take the shot?" I exhaled, gripping my rifle. "Not yet." I needed to know who this was. I stepped onto my porch, rifle raised. "You've got about 5 seconds to explain why you're on my land." The figure froze. Then slowly he raised his hands. Whoa, don't shoot." The voice was younger than I expected. I narrowed my eyes. "Who are you?" He stepped into the light. A kid. Late 20s, maybe, skinny, nervous. Not a fighter, not a thug. I lowered my rifle slightly. "You got about 10 seconds to tell me why you're creeping around my property before I drag you to the sheriff's office myself." He swallowed hard. "I work for Mercer." My fingers tightened on my rifle. Bingo. I kept my voice calm. And he shifted uncomfortably. "They're coming back." I exhaled through my nose. How many? The kid hesitated. All of them. I clenched my jaw. I knew it. Harris was just the first wave. The real attack, it was still coming. I motioned for the kid to sit on my porch. He did start talking. He hesitated, glancing toward the tree line. If they find out I'm here, I cut him off. They won't. Start talking. He swallowed hard. Mercer doesn't care about the HOA scam. That was just Harris's play. I narrowed my eyes. Then what does he want? The kid exhaled. He wants your land. Something in the way he said it made my stomach drop. This wasn't about some petty scam anymore. This was something bigger. Why? I demanded. The kid licked his lips. There's oil under it. My blood ran cold. Oil. It all made sense now. Mercer wasn't just some scam artist. He was an opportunist. He had gotten wind of an oil deposit under my land and figured he could bully me out of it. And if that didn't work, he'd take it another way. I stood, my grip on my rifle tightening. How long do I have? The kid sighed. A few days, maybe less. I exhaled, my mind racing. This was no longer just a property dispute. This was a full-scale takeover attempt, and I had no intention of losing. I met the kid's eyes. You got a choice. Walk away and pretend this conversation never happened, or help me stop them. He hesitated. Then, slowly, he nodded. And that's when I knew the final battle was about to begin. I had 2 days, maybe less, before Mercer made his move. And I wasn't about to let him take 1 damn inch of my land. I spent the next 24 hours preparing, reinforced the entry points, checked my ammo stockpile, installed extra security cameras, and most importantly, called in backup. Jake was already on standby, but I needed more than just a sniper, so I reached out to some old friends, men who knew how to handle themselves in a fight. By the next night, we were ready. 1:27 a.m. The night was quiet, almost too quiet. We waited in strategic positions, watching, listening. Then, just as expected, engines rumbled in the distance, multiple vehicles. I grabbed my radio. Jake, you see this, Jake? Yeah, 3 SUVs, blacked out windows, same as before. Me, how many, Jake? At least 10 men armed. My grip tightened on my rifle. It was go time. The SUVs pulled up just outside my fence line. Doors swung open and men piled out, all of them wearing tactical vests, and then Mercer stepped out. I recognized him immediately. He was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a slick suit like he had just walked out of a high-rise boardroom instead of showing up for a property takeover. He adjusted his tie and smiled. Daniel Evans. I didn't say a word. I just raised my rifle. His smile faltered slightly. Now. No need for that. I came to make you an offer. I smirked. Pretty sure that ship sailed when your guys tried to bulldoze my driveway. Mercer chuckled, shaking his head. Harris was impatient. I prefer more civilized negotiations. He took a step closer. Sell me the land, Daniel. I didn't blink. Not a chance. His smile disappeared. You don't have a choice. The men behind him shifted, resting hands on their weapons. But what they didn't know, Jake was watching every move they made. I exhaled slowly, staying calm. I always have a choice. Mercer clenched his jaw. You're being difficult. No, I tilted my head. I'm just not scared of you. The tension was thick. Then one of Mercer's guys twitched. His hand went for his gun, and then a single red dot appeared on his chest. Jake had him locked in. The guy froze. I smirked. Bad idea. Mercer glanced toward the trees, finally realizing what was happening. Sniper, he swallowed, his confidence cracking for the first time. How about you call off your guy and we talk like adults? I laughed. Buddy, I've already heard your offer. Now here's mine. I pulled out my phone and turned the screen toward him. Live footage of multiple sheriff's cruisers speeding toward my location. Mercer's face twisted in rage. You called the cops, I shrugged. Of course I did. You think I was going to let you just waltz in here unchecked? I gestured toward the security cameras mounted on my house. I've got every move you made recorded, every threat, every trespass, every crime, and now law enforcement has all of it. For the first time, Mercer looked nervous. The sirens grew louder. Mercer's men glanced at each other, uncertain. One of them finally spoke. Boss, we need to go. Mercer clenched his fists so tightly, his knuckles turned white. He glared at me. This isn't over. I smirked. Yeah, it is. And just like that, Mercer turned on his heel and got back in his SUV. His men followed. A minute later, they were gone. The sheriff's cruisers pulled in just as the dust settled. I met Duncan's gaze. Took you long enough. Duncan smirked. Looks like you had it handled. I exhaled, finally letting the tension leave my body. It was over. A week later, Mercer was arrested. Turns out, my evidence was all the state needed to file charges: fraud, conspiracy, land seizure, and Harris. He flipped on Mercer almost instantly. Testified against him in exchange for a reduced sentence. Now, they were both going away for a long time, and my land still mine. Forever. A month later, I got one last letter. It was from Mercer. The words were short, bitter, and full of empty threats. I read it once, laughed, and tossed it in the fireplace. He lost, and I won. I stepped outside, taking a deep breath of my land, my air, my home. No fake HOA cops, no threats, no Mercer, just peace. I smirked, pulling out my phone to text Jake. Me, they're gone for good. Jake, took him long enough. Me, you still keeping watch, Jake, always. I chuckled, staring out over the land my grandfather left me. It had been a fight, but some fights are worth it, because in the end, I kept what was mine. And no one, not Mercer, not Harris, not anyone, would ever take it from me.